So welcome to the On the Blue Line podcast. I am your host, Wayne Mulder, and I'm excited this week. What I want to talk to you about is 6 lies that I was told when I first came into law enforcement. The On the Blue Line podcast starts now. If you break the law, if you decide to do this, we're going to hold you responsible.
You are the only good thing in someone's worst day. That is a privilege for a police officer.
At the very least, you could honor the sacrifices of police officers and their families.
We have the ability to save the Republic. All right, so welcome to the show. Let's get into this. So 6 lies that I was told when I came into law enforcement. And I know what you're thinking. Nobody ever lies, right? Well, some of these are maybe subjective, but what I want you to think about are what are those things that you were told that just were not true and didn't have to be true, right? Now, maybe they were true for the person saying it, but that doesn't mean it had to be true for you when you came into this career. The first one was, and I've heard so many different renditions and so many different versions of, you will be divorced in 5 years. Maybe it's 7 years, maybe it's 8 years, but the point always was that this career is going to take your relationships away from you if you were married prior to this career. You're going to have that starter relationship as a term you hear from time to time, and then you're going to come in this career and you're going to end up divorced, and then you're going to end up marrying another cop because nobody else understands the career the way you do. You know, that's all nonsense, right? Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and that doesn't mean that the person saying it, probably that was their story. But that isn't the takeaway, right? That isn't the lesson. The lesson here is that doesn't have to be true, and it doesn't have to be true for you. If you're new and you've come into this career, you can have a strong relationship. Now, I may not be the perfect guy to get relationship advice from. Listen, that's not the point of this podcast. I've never been divorced. However, I have certainly had good days and bad days and rocky days, just like everybody else. And so just because things may not work out, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about either. What I'm talking about is the mindset that because you came into this career, it just has to go bad. You can't keep that relationship. She's never going to understand. He's never going to understand. And you're going to have to just, cut bait and move on. Yeah, that is nonsense. So what I want to encourage you on is understanding that relationships take work. And if you're in this career, it may take more work. It is true that other people aren't going to necessarily understand what it is that what it is that your day-to-day career is like. And they're not going to understand, like, when Christmas rolls around and you're working and you're like, well, let's make Christmas the 23rd of December. And she may look at you, or he may look at you and be like, that's not Christmas. That's not even Christmas Eve. What in the heck are you talking about? But that's just part of the job. But here's the thing, right? If you're intentional, if you bring intentionality and you start from the very beginning saying, hey, let's work this out. Here's going to be some of the challenges of the job. Then let's make this work, and we will make it work. I can tell you firsthand that it is possible. It's not easy. It doesn't mean that everything is just going to fall together, but what I can tell you is it can happen. And you can have good quality relationships with your significant other and work in this career, and there's no reason to believe that any length of time in this career is going to guarantee that your relationship is going to end. So lie number 2, this one always gets me as well, and that is that you're going to be cynical and hate this job in 7 years. Now listen. Again, there is some truth, and probably the person telling me that when I was sitting there in the academy, brand new little cadet sitting there listening to everything they were saying, in that moment I was probably like, yeah, I could see why you hate this job just based on what they're saying, right? But that doesn't mean it has to be true for you. Here's the thing. I've been in this career for almost 13 years now, and I have enjoyed it. I certainly have had bad days. I've certainly had days I've wanted to exit. I've certainly, even now, I have some struggles physically and so forth that I've talked about openly with the heart surgery and so forth. And in the end, I'm kind of like, should I stay? Should I go? Those are all, that's all part of it. But that's different than allowing cynicism to creep in. That's different than being that old grumpy sergeant or FTO or corporal, and you're sitting around, the admin just hates us and everybody hates it. That is also nonsense, and it's a lie. It doesn't have to be that way. And what's the difference? Well, the difference, or what makes the difference for you, is having a positive mindset, right? The difference is all in here. That is where you can focus on turning what could potentially be negative things. Listen, you're going to see things, do things, have access to things that certainly will be negative. And there are going to be moments that you're like, man, this career sucks, but it doesn't have to. You can choose to change that and to have a positive mindset. So lie number 3. Admin hates you. They hold you back in this career. You've heard some derivative of they only promote the in people, only the people they like. They only promote the people that kiss ass. Whatever terminology, whatever phraseology you've heard over and over, we've all heard that lie. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't some truth again, right? So all of these lies can have some truth. The difference is it doesn't have to be your truth. You can absolutely overcome every one of these, and it doesn't have to be your reality. When it comes to admin, it does maybe quantify a little bit when you talk about upper echelon positions, because obviously, say you work at a sheriff's office. Sheriff's offices are political by their very nature. So it is highly possible that the people who helped that sheriff get elected politically are going to become your next captains and majors, and that actually makes perfect sense. You don't have a lot of political or presidential parties that are running, and then they come in there and then they're like, my cabinet should be made up with everybody who didn't support me for this position. That is very rare, and it doesn't typically happen. And it doesn't happen because it doesn't usually work well. So if that's what you're talking about, then obviously it's not a lie. But if what you're talking about is that, well, they just don't like me, and the only reason that Bob over here got this promotion is, well, because they just like Bob better, and Bob kisses everybody's butt. Yeah, it could be true. Could be true. But 9 out of 10 times, just for an arbitrary stat, 9 out of 10 times that I see that kind of stuff, that's not really what happened. The fact of the matter is Bob has been a go-getter. Bob has been getting off his ass. Bob has been out doing traffic stops. Bob has been doing neighborhood checks. Bob went over to CID to say, hey, what you guys doing here? I've been working this case and I would love to hold on to it, Sarge. Would you mind if I did? And then if I could just maybe work with the detective to learn a little more. That's what Bob did. So then when Bob gets the promotion and you're sitting there being like, I don't know why they always pick Bob over. Well, they picked Bob because Bob did the right thing. And that's the difference, right? So if you, if this is where you're at, I would encourage you with 2 things, right? First of all, don't allow others to determine your happiness. So maybe there is truth. Maybe you do work for a small agency and it really is an in crowd, and the sheriff or the chief just picks, his buddies. Okay, that's fine. So then in my opinion is, and this comes from long before I worked in law enforcement, when I worked in landscaping and I worked with other people, it always came down to, if I've made the decision to work for you, then my relationship is with you and I'm going to honor that. That doesn't mean we're always going to agree, and that doesn't even mean that I may like you or dislike you, right? But what it does mean is that there's a certain honor that comes to that position, and I'm not going to speak badly about you. And if there is a point where that can't be held anymore, because maybe there is truly toxic situations, well, then you have the option to say, you know what? I think I'm going to leave. I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's maybe the right move. And there's nothing wrong with that. Where there is a problem is when you're the guy sitting around and allowing that negativity to creep in, and you're always bad-mouthing the agency you work for. If you're gonna work for an agency, be positive about them. And if you can't be positive for maybe legitimate reasons, then leave. Those are your options. So lie number 4. This one gets me a little bit, right? And this is that whole hard work is a bad thing. And you hear all these different derivatives of this statement. Sometimes you hear the never volunteer for anything. Now, I'll be honest, my dad, my grandfather, other people used to tell me that when I was a kid. It was this whole military mindset of never volunteer for anything. Don't raise your hand, just stand over there in the corner, they'll tell you where they need to go. Okay, I don't know that I agree with that, but another derivative or another way you hear it is, well, this career is safer if you just hang out under a tree somewhere, and you only can do this if you look out for yourself. You'll never survive this career if you're not looking out for yourself. Any of those kind of statements, I again, totally disagree with them. And in most cases, I would say they're lies. Here's where I come from, right? So when I first came to the agency and I sat down and I'm sitting across from the person who's hiring me, and I remember to this day, in fact, I recently sent a note about it because I just thought it was the coolest thing. And they looked me in the eye and said, hey, Wayne, Every time that an opportunity comes up, anytime that they walk in the room, whoever it is, a sergeant, a corporal, whoever your boss is that day, a captain, a major, comes in and says, hey, I need somebody to do something. Be the guy that does this. Every single time. Raise your hand, say, pick me, hey, pick me, I'll do that. It doesn't mean you have to be pretentious, you don't have to be a jerk, but what you're saying is, hey, if you have something that you need done, I'm your guy, I'm gonna help you out. Now, there are times you have to say no, there's schedule conflicts, there's times that maybe it's gonna be extracurricular and outside of your normal hours, and then it's gonna come into family time. That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it. What I'm talking about is being the person who's willing to say, you need somebody, I made an agreement to work for you, and I'm your guy. Because that is gonna help you out. That is going to allow you to move up the ladder at that agency. Every opportunity that I have had to move up in one fashion or another usually has come from being able to do different projects that just kind of got my name known. It was working economic detective cases on the road. It was going into economics and then working big cases that kind of got noticed over in the major crimes unit. It was going into major crimes and then saying, you know what, let me put in for sergeant. You guys need sergeants? I'm here. Let me do that. And on and on. And every opportunity has come from trying to be the guy, and I'm not perfect about it, but trying to be the guy that says, hey, you need somebody? I'm your guy. You're paying me either way. I may as well give you the best work that I possibly can, right? And that will go a long ways in this career. So if you come from that mindset of, you know, these old sergeants and these old stories that you hear from back in the day, and they're like hiding under the oak tree during the entire shift because that's safer, I would encourage you to rethink that. Step away from that. It's complete nonsense, and I totally disagree. Number 5, this career will destroy your health and there's nothing you can do about it. So again, like with most of these, there is some truth to that. This career is hard on your health. There is no doubt about it. As many of you know, if you watched my video a few weeks ago, the reason you didn't hear from me for a year is I just went through open heart surgery. It was the full cut me open, the whole deal. Well, that happened because possibly due in part to working in this career. Now, I was born with a condition that led to it, but there's certainly no doubt that shift work, poor diet, all these things play into our overall physical health. And there is no doubt that you can allow this career to destroy your health. That is why, between that and stress, that so many law enforcement officers die within 5 years of retirement. Where do you think those statistics come from? There is some truth here. What makes it a lie is it doesn't have to be the truth. It doesn't have to be your truth. Focus on your health. Make that a priority. There should be certain things in your life that are non-negotiables, right? These are things that I'm going to do every day. And one of those should be some sort of physical exercise. Now I hear what you're saying. Wayne, this is so difficult. I don't know if I can do that. I don't have enough time. I've got this and this. That's why it's called a priority. Right? And I get it. Yeah, and preaching to the choir. And when you come to me and you're like, hey, Wayne, I just don't know how, blah, blah. Yeah, have you ever tried to do a podcast and to build a business and to work? This isn't about me, right? This is about the simple fact that if you're going to say, I am going to do this because it's priority, then it becomes the priority. So what do I do? Well, what I've done is there are certain days I get out here, maybe I just run sprints before work in my yard. 15 minutes. I'm in the sun, I'm sweating, but I got some exercise in. Maybe it's not my goal, it's not 45 minutes, I wasn't in the gym, I wasn't throwing plates, I wasn't doing what I want to do per se, but I've prioritized something that, you know what, I've got 15 minutes, I'm gonna make it happen. And that is something I want to encourage you to do. So number 6, and the last one for this is alcohol is a good way to ease the stress of the job. On its face, almost everybody knows that is complete BS. BS. Listen, that is the worst thing you could do. And when I first started, it was pretty prevalent. I was on squads that would have big get-togethers and I wanted to be part of the team. And I'm like, man, let me go to this squad. I just want to see everybody and it's fun. And you show up and people are like drunk, like falling over, doing stupid things, having sex outside. We won't talk about that. But yeah, I mean, there is all sorts of just absolute insanity that was taking place, and it was all alcohol driven. Does that mean I'm against alcohol? No, that's not the point of this, right? here's the thing, have the occasional drink, go out for a beer. I don't have an issue with any of that. That's not the point of this. The point of this is that if you're at the point that the career in law enforcement makes you need the drink, it's been such a hard shift, I just need a drink. Or if you're getting home in the morning and you're like, man, I can't sleep until I have 1 or 2 beers, you have a problem. You have a problem. And here's what I see happen, right? I have seen in my career us lose really good officers to DUIs. And I know what you're saying. Well, don't drink and drive. Well, in each of those situations, these guys would have allegedly a couple beers, you know, the whole couple beer thing. But I don't know where the truth is. But what I do know is that if you don't drink and don't get behind the wheel at all, then there is a much higher probability that you will never be pulled over for DUI. So just think about when you drink, if you do drink, and whether or not it is starting to take over your life. If it's becoming something you need to function, then you've got an addiction and it's time to go see somebody. It's time to say enough of this and move on. But as with everything, let's not just take something out, let's put something positive in, right? So let me give you real quick 3 ways that help you cope better with this job. So if you're coming to the alcohol from the mindset of, hey, I need to cope a little better and I just need some way of dealing with it. Well, here's 3 ideas. Number 1 is relationships. So when I talk to the new cadets who are coming into the academy, one of the things I always talk about is to keep your old relationships. When I first came in, there was kind of back to the divorce thing. There was this mindset that you can't keep those old relationships because they just don't understand the job. I would actually now, after 13 years, flip that on its head and say the opposite. You have to keep those old relationships because they understand the life outside the job. The issue is you're dealing with such a small percentage of people over and over again that you start believing that's reality, that everybody has lost their ever-loving mind, which, when you look at a global scale, that may be true. But you start to believe that this is reality, that this is where we're at as a whole, and that may or may not be true. Maintaining those old relationships, those old friendships, keeping out. Maybe you are going out for drinks. Again, nothing wrong with the drinks. That's not the point. But you're keeping those old relationships and you guys are communicating and you're starting to see the world outside. The other thing is developing new relationships. Very powerful. The other thing is hobbies. Now, anything goes here, right? So I don't know. Y'all are so young now coming in this career. Maybe you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For all I know. Listen, it doesn't matter what it is. Just keep those hobbies. Keep something that gets your mind off of it. For me, this podcast, it's kind of a hobby / business because I'm trying to create something more out of it. But it started as a hobby. Writing started as a hobby. It was something that gives me a break. The other nice thing when you pick hobbies like that is it also lets you work through a lot of the thoughts and feelings and different ideas that you have. You're getting it out on paper. You're starting to be like, okay, you know, this is what I want to do, or this is maybe something I need to work on. And there's a lot of self-reflection that goes into that. So whatever it is, I encourage you to do it. Maybe it's mowing the lawn. Maybe it's putting plants in the ground, green side up. Maybe it's whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. Board games, like I said, just find that connection and that hobby. And maybe those 2 things can be the same, right? Maybe those can be relationships that you have with people while simultaneously working on the hobbies that you enjoy and get your minds off of it. And then the last thing, and this kind of goes back to one of the previous points as well, but exercise. If you're going to be addicted to something, why not be addicted to that, right? Like, we know that health is going to be a concern in this career and you're going to struggle with different things. So why not become addicted to health? Why not get that dopamine rush? Get the pump, if you would. I don't know. Whatever it is, but I can tell you this is what, I can't tell you a lot of things, but what I can tell you is what works for me. And for me, like even before I did this podcast, it was important that I made it to the gym, because getting in the gym, you get out there, you start with a treadmill, you get that blood pumping, you get that heart rate up, then you go over, you lift some weights, it feels good, you get that dopamine rush, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I'm ready to go. Get a cup of coffee and I'm ready to talk for an hour. I won't do that to you. But the truth is that is what helps to offset where a lot of people used to need alcohol to feel really good. Use exercise, and that can become a way of life. So those are the 6 lies I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, then please send me a message. Go to our Instagram page. It's On the Blue Line Podcast. That's at On the Blue Line Podcast. And in there, I want you to send me a DM and tell me what you thought about this episode. So again, Instagram at On the Blue Line Podcast. You got to like the page and send me a DM, and I will get back with you. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. And then lastly, if you haven't looked at our Patreon page, I encourage you to go to ontheblueline.com, scroll down, you're going to see the link to the Patreon page. Go in there, see what you think. If you're enjoying this content, what Patreon brings you is more, just more. That's all it is, more. So that's all I have for you this week. I hope you have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week in the podcast. In the meantime, I'll see you out there on the Blue Line.